Hi everyone, and thanks for joining us. Welcome to today's webinar, which is on the topic Designing a $90 million project with the help of remote collaboration and Enscape. I'm Gemma Da Silva, part of the Enscape marketing team, and today we're going to be learning about an ongoing project, the UTSA School of Data Science and National Security Collaboration Center in Texas, USA, involving both Overland and Jacobs. Joining us to discuss the project from Overland, we have Rebecca Sibley, project architect, Charles Schneider, project manager, and Michael Ray, senior principal and VP of studio operations. And with us from Jacobs, we have Waylon Sudd, buildings principal and manager of projects for Central Texas. Thanks to all of our presenters for taking part in the webinar. Really great to have you here with us today. And to host the webinar, I'm happy to welcome back the Art of Construction. We have marketing director Scott Hicken and executive director and architect Matt McMullen, who you may already know from their popular Art of Construction podcast series for the AEC industry, and that has now exceeded 200 episodes, which is an incredible number, so a big welcome to you both as well. Before we start, I'd like to mention that we are live, so if you have a comment or a question that you'd like to ask, you can add it to the questions pane on your screen, and hopefully we'll have some time towards the end to answer a few of those. So without any further ado, I will now hand over to Scott, who is going to set the scene for today's presentation and discussion. Thanks very much, Scott.
Thank you, Gemma, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on today's webinar. So my name is Scott with Art of Construction, and we're just going to set the stage really quick for what we're going to be talking about today, which is obviously working remote and collaborating remote, not just with the team in your company, but between multiple firms. So to set the stage really quick, let's talk about the double-edged sword of working remote. So there obviously are a lot of benefits, right? You have a flexible schedule. You can work from anywhere. You don't have to drive for 2 hours, so you're probably in a better mood when you start working. You can spend time with family, and of course, you can work from home. So a lot of great benefits to working remote, but obviously there's some downsides too. So in these surveys, we can see that some of the biggest struggles that we've had, which I'm sure many of you out there have dealt with as well, is collaboration and communication. So how do you really stay close with your team? Loneliness, not being able to unplug, working all the time, being in different time zones than teammates, staying motivated, and even just finding reliable Wi-Fi. So this is the double-edged sword of working remote. And for the AEC industry specifically, there is this challenge of how do you stay connected to your project team, both professionally and personally, especially when as architects, as designers and engineers, you're creating a vision, right? And to be unified in what that vision is, it's not easy, especially through remote work. So how do you do that? Integrating workflows and design processes. If you're not in the same room, if you're never seeing each other in person, how do you really design together instead of everyone just doing it their own way and then saying, here you go? How do you truly integrate teams? And client, community, and stakeholder engagement. If you're really trying to sell a community on a project, how do you do that if you can't have an event? If you're trying to get the stakeholders to buy in on your vision for the project, or even 6 months down the road, you're trying to get them to continue to support your vision for the project when things might not be going as planned. It's a lot harder to do that when you can't talk to each other in person. So these are the challenges that the AEC world is currently facing today. But there are some amazing solutions to these problems, which we're going to be talking about today. So obviously, cloud-connected technology, centralized data is a huge part of it. Being able to design off one model, being able to all share the same set of information, to all be communicating on the same channels so everyone can see everything that's happening. Real-time visualization-based design process. Obviously, we're going to be talking a lot about that today. One of the most powerful things that tools like Enscape is able to do is to give this real-time visualization of a project, which can allow people in different states, even different countries, to really be able to understand each other, what you're talking about, because you're literally looking at a rendering of the project in 3D and not just something in Revit or even something on a piece of paper. And finally, multimedia storytelling, which we'll also be talking about today. So when you're trying to sell your vision for a project and you can't ever do it in person, how do you do that? Well, you do it through multimedia, you do it through video, you do it through podcasting, you do it through all these different mediums. And we'll be talking about the use of Enscape to really tell the story and set the vision for the project we'll be talking about today, and how Overland and Jacobs use that to their advantage. So these are just some of the benefits. If you were at a previous webinar that we did with Overland Partners, it was all about creating a culture of collaboration within your firm. And now we're taking that one step further, and we're talking about creating a culture of collaboration between multiple firms. So how do you really do that when things get really complex? And so there's good and there's bad, but we're going to talk today about how Jacobs and Overland really powered through that. And just to really set the stage here, finally, just going to leave you with this quote. Technology now allows people to connect anytime, anywhere, to anyone in the world from almost any device. This is dramatically changing the way people work, facilitating 24/7 collaboration with colleagues who are dispersed across time zones, countries, and continents. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, is how dispersed teams across everywhere can still come together under one unified vision to create amazing buildings and do amazing projects and drive AEC industry and our world forward. So with that, I will pass it off to the Overland team.
Well, hello, everybody. We're excited to be here, and my name is Michael, as introduced, and we are delighted to represent a collective team, UTSA, Whiting, Turner Construction, Jacobs, and Overland. And what you're seeing on your screen is ultimately what the design delivered and what we're building right now. What the story that you're going to see here unfold is not only one of remote work, which frankly has been the entire time we've delivered this project and actually procured the project as part of our submission, and we'll talk more about that, but also the ultimate delivery and construction as it's happening now. So go ahead and go to the next slide. I think the excitement here is we started this project about in June of 2020, and we were able to break ground in early December of 2020 and issuing final construction documents just recently this past month. So we're really happy to tell the success story of this during this time period. It's brought our team together for sure, and it's really built on our foundation, one of our core values, that is collaboration. I think that's a vital in our industry, and it's vital as part of our collaborations internally and also externally with Whiting, Turner and Jacobs. So we are going to talk a little bit about before we actually started the design. We went through it was kind of a two-step procurement process where we were competing against a couple other firms, and what you're seeing on the screen are some of the things that we were developing as we were having discussions with UTSA and as other teams were having discussions with UTSA, all in a remote environment, via Teams, in a very systematic kind of process. And we were really understanding the site, trying to understand the program, trying to understand the massing, and trying to showcase how our collective team, including the engineers, how those things were developed in construction as well. So we were ultimately giving a price and a design to UTSA to get a contract and start construction and start design in June. And so what you're seeing now in front of you is an example of how we did that. Whiting Turner was really extracting information from our model live, giving quantities, starting to understand pricing, all this as part of our design build submission, our design build team. So just that's some background. This is really some of the early work and give some context to the project itself. Downtown San Antonio is a dynamic place, and this project is really located at the central part in the intersection of UTSA downtown campus, a federal government building that's coming in online right now. That's an important part of downtown and the adjacencies to this. The civic component of downtown in San Antonio Municipal. There is also a tech corridor, and then right in the heart of everything is Zona Cultural and San Pedro Creek that's adjacent to the property. And all that really intersects right on this property, and how that really works and collaborates was an important part of how that design evolved, and how we were able to communicate that as the jumping off point for this design element. So this is De La Rosa Street, it's the main street. The building to the left is actually the School of Data Science National Security Collaboration Center. And In the distance, you'll see the downtown campus. And really, one of the major things that came out early was this was the connective tissue of this building that is the first real building in downtown proper, if you will, for the downtown campus of UTSA. And so it was important to connect it back to the downtown campus just outside of the loop, and at the same time understand how that street can really be livened and maybe connected and branded as part of the overall. Here's the overall view, and you can tell like in many cities in San Antonio, we have a loop just outside of downtown that kind of unfortunately cuts off some of the connectivity. This project is just the start of many collaborations, not just with UTSA, but with the city of San Antonio and Bexar County, to connect this campus that's building off of the existing downtown campus. And it's really going to be distributed amongst a lot of downtown. Ultimately, this is the first project, the SDS and NCC on the right-hand side, and you can see the downtown campus and the master plan of the white buildings as UTSA is kind of envisioned in the future. The importance of this new creek and the San Pedro Creek being an element of what is turning the timeline back in the history of San Antonio in this particular part of town, and showcasing lots of different components of its culture, its landscape, its flora and fauna, and that is the connection ultimately that this building will sit next to. The truth is, here is the existing condition that the San Pedro Creek, the city of San Antonio and Bexar County has been working on adjacent to our site. And so our site, if you're looking at this on the image on the right, it's the left-hand side. This was essentially a drainage ditch that was envisioned to be reconnected to its pastoral landscape. And so this building continues to embrace that idea. And so ultimately, before we even started, we were able to articulate collectively the design, the construction cost, and the placement of the building adjacent to this developing infrastructural project. So that is kind of the stage that I like to set for where we were and how we started schematic design. The other component of this that's really important to understand is the building itself and all the different agencies. It's a really interesting mix of groups from both industry partners, federal partners, and UTSA's academic school of data science component, and how that all collaborates within one building and integrates to deliver highest quality students and research out into the world through this particular building for data science and cybersecurity and beyond.
And I'm going to interject really quickly here. And it's a space for collisions to happen between students and these partners. And so we were really intentional and put a lot of thought into how we had a very strategic mix of programs throughout the entirety of the building. We wanted to create these spaces for interaction and collision between students and these federal and industry partners to happen. It was a goal and expressed interest of the university, and one that we took to heart and really tried to make this a spatial reality.
So as we were getting started with schematic design, really leading the concept of this new building and the future of it, it was adjacent to this notion of the creek and its history, and really this idea of tying those two things, the past and the future, together in this particular place at this particular moment in time in history, was a really vital part of a lot of the ideas that started to flow out. The logistics of that were understanding the program, shifting that program around, and developing floor plans that were at the same time visually impressive.
Yeah, so these are some images that we shared with UTSA early on using Enscape to, the building was still very much in flux. We were shifting program around, developing the exterior fenestration and things like that. But early on, we needed to make sure that they were buying off on this concept of an open floor plan, because this is this is not a standard kind of UTSA building. This was going to be something where we were shifting the design approach, and we wanted to make sure that they had that consensus before we moved too far forward. From those early conceptual diagram images through Enscape, this is kind of where we are now with all of the systems integrated and the architectural developed. This is one of the main spaces on the first floor. A big communicating stair that goes up to level 2. Very open public space, inviting lots of public art and things like that.
Yeah, and as you can see, a lot of the ceilings are exposed. It's kind of a high-tech building, very raw, very research-based. And so Wayland, brought up the notion that in the midst of all this, there was a lot of changes going on. We were moving chases, we moved mechanical equipment. I mean, it was, yes, we were producing pretty pictures and ensuring that the stakeholders were all engaged and understanding what it was going to feel and look like. But at the same moment, in the same model, Wayland and Adrian and also our mechanical, electrical, plumbing, AV, security, all these other consultants and team members were really collaboratively engaging the model and moving things around that could, ultimately show up on these visualizations. But we did a good job of staging that in a way that made it appropriate.
Yeah, and collaborating together on BIM 360 and seeing the model live was really helpful. We could make those adjustments live in coordination meetings, and we could have those conversations about how things looked and what the impact of design decisions were.
Absolutely. That certainly helps the engineers to have such a great tool like this, where we can visually kind of walk through a space and see the impact of the large engineering systems that we're putting in, such as a double stack cable tray fit in with a large duct. We can kind of see what the impacts are, and that made it very helpful to have the real-time rendering.
I think what we were doing simultaneously with the interior coordination and extensive modeling of architecture and systems. Sorry, Wayland and team, we probably asked you guys to model things to a little bit more a higher level of precision, just because everything was exposed and that was of critical importance to us. But what we also tried to do at the same time was really develop a character for this urban setting that we were using to tell the story, to get buy-in from our from the university, from all the way up from President Amy to department heads to students and community members. This really quickly became a tool that we were able to use to produce really fast and effective ways of communicating, essentially. Let's see, I can advance this myself. I think we were looking at shifting very fundamentally the idea of adding more transparency to the building. There was a significant flip in the way that we thought about the exterior skin from the concept design through schematic design, and so we needed to get very quick buy-in and feedback from the university, and we were able to really utilize Enscape to investigate what those envelope changes meant, but also at the same time really start to look at how we essentially used window design and fenestration to create a very interesting and varied pattern that was responsive to the interior program.
Yeah, from a timing standpoint, like so the design was delivered in May as part of the design build submission, and what Rebecca's articulating is a month's worth of work in June, where we took the design that we delivered in May, essentially redesigned the exterior envelope. We were adjusting program and certainly understanding and developing the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, all the guts of the building, and delivering a cost that was in sync with that adjustment.
Yeah, as we're making model adjustments, we're sharing those with Whiting Turner and getting those real-time updates. So there was very little lag, if any at all. So we're going to go through a couple of different of the spaces and kind of talk how the collaboration between Overland and Jacobs occurred, and Waylon, feel free to step in at any point here and kind of shed some additional light on these. But one such space that was highly coordinated and collaborative was this idea of having a data center within the building, and not just one that was on the ground floor. We made it difficult and decided to put it on the third floor, which posed a lot of challenges in terms of weight and access to it and things like that.
But it had to be centrally distributed.
But it had to be centrally distributed. And a focal point. The idea that most data centers are usually in dark boxes that don't have windows. We wanted to showcase this. This is a data-centric project. We wanted to make that as transparent, as accessible as possible to visitors and students. And so we put it on the third floor with lots of glass into it from the interior. And what you're seeing on the screen here is just sort of that iterative process, taking information from Jacobs on the engineering side, the electrical requirements, mechanical requirements, and the space requirements for hosting all the racks. And then we had to overlay that with the security requirements for UTSA and how we can access and provide proper egress and things like that. So we were working with a variety of different tools to do that. But in addition to that, we were also using Enscape because it was important for the client to understand what they were getting visually. Especially since it was going to be a very highly visible, transparent space. And what you're seeing here is the result of that coordination and collaboration. What you see on the screen is a variety of different consultants' works here. I mean, you have architectural, you have mechanical, structural. We had to raise this whole thing up 2 feet for raised access flooring, mechanical, I mentioned electrical, AV, IT, data, security. So a lot of different consultants had to come together to make this reality.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, go ahead. I think you've got some things to say here.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, for sure, the airflow path and how we did that with secure partitions was of particular importance in ensuring we had free movement of airflow to get returned back to the air conditioning systems, as well as ensuring we had the proper maintenance clearances that we needed for the units as well. So it was very close coordination, especially overhead with all the cable tray work, fire suppression, and refrigeration lines that we had to route. Very close collaboration.
One of the next spaces is called the MultiPurpose Room. This is on the main floor, and there were some very specific design requirements early on. And what you're seeing here is an early conceptual image that we had shared. There were some of the specific requirements from UTSA were a specific head height and clearances that we needed to meet, as well as an unobstructed space for having classes and presentations in the round. And we had to solve those things early on because there were a lot of structural and cost implications into making those things happen. And some of the decisions that occurred included actually depressing this down 4 feet, as well as doing these gigantic structural concrete girders across the space. One of the things that we didn't mention early on was UTSA wanted to keep the whole building under high-rise height and to avoid triggering code elements that were associated with that. And so the design team had to come up with a way of making this space work and be able to afford it from a cost standpoint. One of the great benefits of depressing this actually puts us 4 feet closer to engaging that San Pedro Creek and making this space much more valuable to the university in our minds. And so again, these are just a couple of different ways showing how we collaborated with Jacobs. We had a concept early on with the massing of that space, but understanding how mechanically we were going to feed that space. The space was actually also intended to be divided into 3 classrooms, 2 smaller ones and 1 larger one.
The Swiss Army knife
Yeah.
of spaces, essentially. And so all of the systems needed to reflect a very high level of flexibility and use.
Yeah, and In addition to that, there were some security requirements to be able to host very high level, high security conferences in this space and be able to kind of basically cut it off from interference from the outside, which was definitely a challenge architecturally. And then you can see in the bottom, we were actually in coordination meetings utilizing Enscape to fly around the model and spot coordination issues where we needed to move ducts and other model elements and things like that. And then also getting down to some of the simpler things, just picking finishes and understanding the acoustics of the space. These are acoustic panels and how those are all detailed. And again, it's just a simple tool to convey how all of that gets coordinated. But also furniture. Once we had the interior designer on board, we had to also study and pick real world furniture and how that was all going to fit, lay out, and then how that related to AV projection and the classroom setups, coordination with Jacobs on where floor boxes were going to go, electrical requirements, data requirements for all of these different arrangements. I want to weigh on if there's anything specific that you wanted to speak to in those regards. Are you on mute?
Ooh, that's the first one we've had this session.
Okay, we can move on. And this is that final product. So you see the integration of not only structure but the furniture overlapping with AV, lighting, mechanical, hidden all above the ceiling, these movable partitions. So highly complex space come together in a very kind of seamless manner, and it's able to be communicated back to the universe in a very clear way with the use of Enscape.
Yeah, and all this really is the use of BIM 360 and Enscape in our Teams environment allowed us to completely integrate. I mean, we were all working from our bedrooms, living rooms, and makeshift offices throughout this period of time. And so it was, I think, a very seamless way of operating, and at the same time engaging because we could visualize it.
Yeah, it was incredibly helpful to be able to have the entire team on a call, make live model updates. If we didn't have to go back and save to the FTP side or something, they were all being saved to the cloud. So team members were able to move things in real time while we're flying around the Enscape model and seeing those coordination.
So I wanted to take the opportunity to zoom back out a little bit and bring this back to sort of the larger urban context that we discussed at length at the beginning, and really showcase a little bit of how we used Enscape and our modeling capabilities to be able to look at this as a piece of downtown San Antonio. We have a pretty extensive model of downtown. We also modeled San Pedro Creek. We, of course, located that. I think we had like 2 or 3 separate site models just to be able to insert with our working building model. And we, once we got it in here, I think these are images we took during DD and started really flying around and investigating some of these view corridors through some of the most visible high trafficked parts of downtown. This main image that you see here is actually of our San Fernando Cathedral, which is the literal historic heart of our 300-year-old city, and realizing that, oh snap, we actually have a gigantic, 16-foot tall louver that is just super highly visible. So let's get Wayland to do something to try and move it around. But we were also really looking at what this, what the view was of our building from the UTSA campus, looking at it from different vantage points. From alternate areas of San Pedro Creek, looking at it from a project that we're actually working on a couple of blocks north. And so this was really helpful to just illuminate the character it has within our city, and then it allows us to make active changes as we're looking at it from different angles in San Antonio. One way that we were actually, we wanted to take a little bit of a deeper dive because it really showcases a lot of the collaborative efforts that we had with Jacobs was our landing of learning. We integrated this as sort of this beacon for the city. It was a critical part of the design to give UTSA this very strong, deliberate, and illuminating presence in downtown. This is their first building that is separate from their downtown campus, and it's in this incredibly tight and urban site. And so we wanted to give them this lantern, again, this beacon, but also gives them a very interesting and subtle way of branding this building. So we have a series of light fixtures integrated with a parametric grid pattern that we developed through a series of grasshopper scripts that allows us to provide levels of shading throughout some of the open office spaces. We were able to integrate the UTSA logo into that, and then we're able to really look at the way that we, these are just some of the studies, and actually Enscape was critical to the way that we were investigating this modeling in terms of looking at it during multiple points of day, looking at it at night, and then investigating sort of shadow and real-time levels of how that impacts the work surfaces on the interior. We were able to take our lighting fixture selection to our electrical team at Jacobs. We worked with 2M Lighting here in San Antonio to really focus and narrow down on an acclaimed lighting fixture. We were able to run a number of photometric iterations on this, and we're able to look at the impact of what that frick pattern would be, and what the impact of the location of the light is with the plane of glazing. It was just this really great iterative process. I mean, we would have this again in real time. We would develop it and then ultimately took it into Enscape to be able to provide an illustration to UTSA to be able to get their acceptance of the amount of lighting, but also their acceptance of the cost associated with adding that lighting. So we were communicating this in tandem with Jacobs and our lighting designers to UTSA and to Whiting Turner, who was providing that cost information. And so ultimately we ended up going with this top light only scenario. We also did a sort of mini mock-up in our office to be able to prove that out. And we're doing an on-site mock-up that will be constructed within the next month to also look at that and make sure that this works as designed. So,
yeah, it's a great example of one of many items that I think we leverage the team dynamic in the environment that we had. And we're happy to say that it's on schedule. It's started construction in early December. We're currently framing out level 2. And this is all from starting schematic design in June. So now it's moving forward, and we've got fall of 2022 when it opens up. So just really delighted to share that is continuing to push forward. It's also the first LEED certified project for UTSA, and really delighted that is happening in the midst of everything else. So this is an example of a different view from the San Pedro Creek, and it really has been a great project to engage the community in. And so we're not only coordinating San Pedro Creek. There's a project ultimately that Dolorosa, the street that it's on, will be reinvented, and there is then also an art component to this on the site and inside the building, where there's at minimum 2 or 3 art components that will be integrated to the building. And then there is a work that we're doing with the sustainability groups in UTSA for a discovery garden, and that's also happening on site. So these are all micro elements of coordination that our team's been continuing to exercise as we're moving forward.
I also think what's going to be really exciting is that we're hopefully going to be doing post-occupancy evaluations with the university and Jacobs, and I think that leveraging the BIM model that we have and the amount of work that's going to come out of our extensive commissioning process, we'll be able to really have these conversations and look at the real impact that these systems and spaces that we've designed have had. And so I think that is something that we'll be facilitating with UTSA.
So I'm excited to wrap it up with this. We've had the groundbreaking, and UTSA has had an amazing multimedia storytelling component to this, and that's on this website for everyone to view. And really, it's been a culmination of all the work that's been put together collectively to showcase and engage the community in this environment of COVID and post-COVID world that we're moving into, where you can really go ahead and launch it. Where you can really understand and see there's the QR code. You can really understand each of the spaces by looking at it three-dimensionally and leveraging those tools that Enscape already has to not only connect with our larger community, but the donor community, which this has definitely been a big part of the story, is engaging larger donors as they start to program and activate UTSA in different ways. So super excited to have been part of this and continue to be part of this. I think there's just a handful of other slides here, and then we'll open it up for questions. Yeah. Let's go to the next one. So thank you for that. We'll turn it over to Scott and Matt to ask the questions and move forward into Q&A.
Thank you, Michael. This is really the third time that we've had an opportunity to work with Overland Partners, and this time really around team collaboration. So that was a great presentation that you guys put together. It's you literally had every single thing that could possibly happen in a project, multiple partners, a difficult site. Maybe the only thing that didn't exist was flooding from the adjacent canal. But impressive that you guys were able to take all those parameters and put them together. I'm going to throw out some questions on behalf of our listeners and on behalf of the AOC team. And I really want to throw it out in a team collaborative format rather than calling on you guys individually. The first thing is, given the tight timeline, you guys have 20 months for design and construction. How did you guys go about integrating all the stakeholders who obviously had different goals for the project? And then what kind of platform challenges did you find for collaborating technology amongst your partners?
Well, I'll take the technological aspect, and you're going to take the collaboration with stakeholders. From a technological standpoint, early on in the RFP process, we were already having those conversations with Whiting Turner and with Jacobs to decide what were the platforms we were going to operate from, whose standards were we going to use, and so on and so forth. So we made those things early on in the process, and since we had made those decisions early on, it allowed us to work through a lot of the hiccups that we were going to see. Now, we had some the challenges that we did have were, where are we going to save collaborative files, whose server are those going to be on, how are these being shared with UTSA? But I think through that process, we were able to vet and kind of figure out what worked best. But talk a little bit about the stakeholders.
Yeah, stakeholders. The process that UTSA set up for securing the work was great, because we are actually able to engage stakeholders at that point early, before we were able, which is unique to a design build submission, frankly. So I think that's an important part, and that gave us a huge step forward into schematic design, where we engaged even a larger group, not only inside the building with the SDS and the NCC, which I think collectively there was 20 or 30 points that we needed to touch in the building, but there was also then a collective community outside the building, the west side of San Antonio, or the city of San Antonio, Bexar County, the San Pedro Creek team, the De La Rosa team, and the adjacent historic group that's right there adjacent to the building, and many others that we were giving presentations to live on virtually, and then hearing comments back as they're seeing it develop in the background. And so that happened multiple times throughout the summer of the early part of the design, and we're continuing. In fact, got another one tomorrow that bringing on a stakeholder for UTSA, and got a call this morning that we need to participate, and we're happy to do so. It's been that kind of access point, right? It's making sure that the availability is there on both sides of the fence, and we're doing that live pretty regularly.
So let me kind of continue down that vein, because I think people see Enscape kind of as a big picture graphic tool, and you guys actually got more granular with it. And I know, Rebecca, you talked a little bit about using it to study sort of acoustic properties and materials, but then also, and I know you mentioned a little bit about using it for collision detection and really starting to study how duct work and changes like that were running through the project. Can you guys talk a little bit about sort of more like granular use of Enscape and how it helped you?
Yeah, I think for us, sorry, I think for us, from an engineering perspective, we can get kind of tunnel vision where we're stuck in the 3D modeling aspect deep into Revit, and that's one way to look at how things are working together in the model, because we do have other models linked in, obviously, but it is just so valuable for us to have something that gives us a feel of what the space really, what it's like being in the space and how our equipment impacts the space. Because it's so easy for us to just say, well, I've got to size it this way because I need this velocity and it's going to be like this. But we're really impacting everybody that's using that space. And so that it was extremely valuable to do our own walkthrough, and at our desk, so that was extreme.
Rebecca, on the interior side, I mean, what did you experience there with acoustics and materials and finishes? I know you showed just one example, but where else did you guys use that in the project?
Well, there are a couple of key interior spaces that the university really wanted to highlight. They want, again, to go back to what Rebecca said previously about creating these very intentional collisions between the students and the federal and industry partners. We actually pulled some of the public space out. We have these areas we call the BFPs, which are the food and beverage areas. And so we created these very open and inviting, for lack of a better word, kitchen type spaces, the break room areas where we wanted students to hang out, where we wanted the other users of the building to hang out, to have those casual interactions. And so we used that. We used Enscape to help study what those spaces were like, as well as the other collaborative spaces. We have some areas where we have double height spaces where we're trying to admit light into the building, and we grouped other collaborative spaces around there. So studying what those places were like, as well as the transparency of those and the materials that we were selecting and what that all kind of looked like.
I think there's a lot of power in the way that Revit can map materials, and the way that Enscape reads those materials and allows us to put those materials in a real-time setting. I know we had a lot of, just thinking about the tile and the carpet, for example. I think that, we don't have a lot of tile in the project, but where we do have it, it's like really nice, beautifully patterned, very colorful selections. And so we were able to really quickly apply materials to walls and actually investigate and look in real time and look at different options of what that selection would be. And because we were not in the same space, and because we are not able to have these physical samples in front of us, it was really nice just to be able to flip through that really quickly.
And I will also say, this is less about the architectural side, but it was incredibly helpful to have the robust asset library to be able to populate the model with people and plants and things like that. Whenever we did get called upon by UTSA to create some more outward-facing imagery, because we've kind of been in the trenches really pushing forward with design. It's like, oh wait, we need to have graphics produced for a website. And okay, well, we have this asset library we can quickly pull from to populate the model and actually make it into a presentation tool.
Well, hey, speaking of the trenches, let me pull you guys out of the trenches. We were micro there. So let's go macro now. So as you guys know, like every project, especially in an urban context, the project team thinks they know who their stakeholders are, but then there's one final stakeholder, which is the general community that makes their voice heard. And I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit, and you showed some images of that, but how did you guys use Enscape to assist in creating sort of that community in urban buy-in? Because I know you guys talked about that in our pre-webinar call of how important that was to USA to create the bond.
Absolutely, yeah. The engagement that UTSA provided, not only they helped assist and navigate who do we speak to when, and I think the nice thing was they were calling the meetings, making sure that the right stakeholders were there at the right time, and it was everything from a large ULI gathering of hundreds of people on a placemaking charrette really early on in the process, where you had an engagement of everyone from the neighborhood to the city to the county to just developers in the area to donors to UTSA stakeholders that were engaged, and really working through and breaking out into work sessions, and then having those discussions bring back to the design. I mean, that was within week 1 or 2 of starting schematic design, and that really launched us into understanding when we needed to touch base with San Pedro Creek and their team, because they were developing this work alongside us, and not only coordinating from a design standpoint, but coordinating from a construction sequencing standpoint. And then there's the same idea on the streetscape, which may be a different timeline, and we needed to work there a little bit more at a higher level to understand the sequencing of when that project would occur, what's the extent of that project, so it's a little, it's the timing of that slightly different. And so what Enscape allowed us to do is constantly show visuals, constantly engage, rotate people around in the space, and ultimately the design itself as it evolved. And that was critical, especially in this remote environment. And I think that's the importance of it. And I feel like us doing that internally at the building with Waylon and his team, being able to leverage that I and Ben to produce the efficiencies of the cost estimating and the modeling takeoff for our Whiting Turner partners, and then at the same time showcase the visuals, with everyone. I think it's important.
No, it's really, really good. And I have one final question, and I just kind of want to pass it around to all 4 of you and have each of you kind of give your take on it here before we pass it back to Gemma for audience questions. But it seems to me like we had a little bit of a "It's a Wonderful Life" moment, with Jimmy's work, where we got a chance to see what the world would be like if we were actually able to be meeting with people in real time. And so we were handed this kind of incredible opportunity of how to make lemonade out of lemons. So given the fact that you guys did this very complicated project, lots of stakeholders, super tight timeline, tight budget, virtually, using Enscape and other platform materials, or other technology platforms, what would you guys take away from this process moving forward post-pandemic? If each one of you could kind of throw your thought in there.
Great question.
It's been quiet for a while. We'll jump to the engineer for.
Yeah, I would say, for us, I felt like we didn't skip a beat, and it only helped us in many ways with efficiency, because we could schedule meetings back to back. You're able to work on other things while you're in a meeting with somebody. If another group's talking, you're able to kind of be efficiently working on something on the side. I mean,
other Overland projects, right?
Other Overland projects. So it has given that ability to kind of take some of the drive time out of it as well. Just traveling to a meeting can cut an hour out of your day. Where in this scenario, there's been ways we've been able to just keep right on plugging through and being efficient. So it's created some efficiencies from my perspective. But that person being there, working through things on a whiteboard, and it's tough to miss. We miss that. because there's a lot of value in that. But it's the tools that we have are just so amazing with ST.
Yeah, no, I agree. Rebecca, what are your thoughts?
Gosh. So I am an interesting case. I worked remotely for about
With MS Teams and other types of tools, Zoom. So
I think
he's got a lag.
yeah, I think we're having some technical difficulties.
Yeah, that
but
was a little bit in that chart.
So I worked remotely for about 4 years leading up to the pandemic. So my experience has been that this has just been a way that we've been working for a while. At least I was forced to work sort of in a more digital environment, but I think it's really just reinforced a lot of the storytelling that we have been able to do, and it gives us another tool, another way of describing in a very fast and comprehensive way how space can really impact that user experience. And I think that the way that we designed this was really through the eye of the visitor, through the building, through the students, through the staff, faculty, and just the different partners, but also ultimately guests. That first level 1 was really crafted to be an open gathering space for people to gather under that front porch, people to gather inside on that communicating stair. And I think that, I'm not, short of us now all gathering around sort of one computer screen, I am going to miss just sort of the double monitor life and being able to describe that in 2 monitors. But yeah, it is nice to see this team. That's the first time that we've been together in a while, a very much a while. So.
Yeah. Charles, your thoughts?
I'm good with what Waylon said. I'm a bit of a, I don't say that I'm a micromanager or anything like that, but I do care about efficiencies and getting things done in a timely manner because of coordination. And so there's definitely this heightened efficiency, not only on the production side, but just the communication side, collaboration side, and then the side of sharing it with the owners. I mean, working remotely has allowed us to do all those things that Waylon mentioned, but then at the same time, like if we need to have a call with the client to get buy-in on something that just developed the day before, we were able to do that and do that digitally because we didn't have to coordinate everybody's schedules plus travel time and things like that. And so it's like, hey, here's a doodle poll. It's like, tell us what your availability is. We were able to hop on a call and get that to share collaboration. So I think my biggest takeaway is there's very little room for excuses now. Is that we have the ability to work very quickly, to communicate very effectively, while also being able to still produce at a very high quality level. So that's sort of my biggest takeaway.
Yeah, I think definitely the efficiency is a key takeaway. But also there's the other side of that, which is the personal relationship and the connectivity is, in the early parts of this project, which kind of corresponded with the early parts of us all shutting down and working from home, it was exciting in many ways. And then I think we've all seen the fatigue set in as well. So I think it's a balance as we move forward. And I think it's that human balance that we've got to strike as we move forward, not leaving behind the things that we feel made some of these things really exciting, engaging. I think the access to not only, from everyone's perspective, I think from UTSA's perspective, Jacob Weddington, Overland perspective, that access has really opened up that communication and those relationships on another level, and hopefully that continues, while at the same time, as we all feel more and more comfortable coming back and engaging in person, there's no replacement of that. And so maybe being more strategic about when those moments are will be a really lovely addition back to how we currently are working. So
Well, I couldn't agree more. So I just want to thank you guys. Thank you so much for the presentation. I think people found it valuable. And with that, I throw it back to Gemma. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So we have 5 more minutes left, and I do have 3 questions that have come in from the audience. So perhaps we have time to tackle these. So first one, how long did this project take to model, and how big was the project team?
Okay, so project team fluctuated on the architectural side. I mean, Overland was much more upfront. We worked through schematic design and basically had a 50% DD handoff. I would say at our largest size in that time, we probably had 5 or 6 people. It wasn't a huge team. And then Jacobs was able to, whenever they took over, they were able to. They're much larger company, and they were even leveraging people that were working in Poland just to get the additional work time on the project. And so we
Austin,
Fort Worth,
DC,
Austin, yeah, they were all over the place, and so they were able to flex their team. We had Jacobs were on point for our MEP design. We had AV, IT security. We had landscape. We had.
What do you think, about 20 to 30 at any one time in the middle of it is kind of the average? And I think it's important to note it's 176,000 square feet, maybe plus, 6 stories, and the timeline again for the design was June to December in terms of the production of it.
Yeah, and in terms of the modeling aspect of it, I mean, you know, there were still elements of the design that we were modeling just 2 or 3 weeks ago because of just the timing and the decision making from UTSA. But a lot of the upfront modeling conceptually took place during that kind of very compressed RFP schedule. But you know, once we had that, we were able to translate that extremely quickly into Revit.
At 50% DD, we had a pretty.
Yeah, about 50%.
So what's that timeline? So June to 50% DD.
That was end of June. Yeah, August. Yeah,
so 3 months you had not only an architectural model, you had all the engineering model kind of integrated by that point, and then from there it was really more adjusting and tweaking.
I think we focused a lot on the larger urban models really early on during SD, so we were really building out that. We already had a downtown model, but we had spent a significant amount of time getting the Simplified Creek model up to date because it was just sort of a really critical part of understanding the site.
well, we actually invested some time because we knew what we wanted to communicate as part of the RFP. We actually invested some time. We actually invested some time during the RFP phase to model San Pedro Creek. We actually were able to pull from other projects we were working on in the area. And so a lot of that was done before we even started schematic design, which was extremely beneficial. And getting early design concepts from landscape, we were able to translate that into, you know, they were working in CAD, and so we were actually translating their designs into the site model as well pretty early on.
It's a huge model. I mean,
It's massive.
It's almost like I mean, at least just for the architectural model, it's tremendous.
And you mentioned BIM, sorry, Revit. So one of the questions came in was, you know, did you use a BIM process during the design and construction process? So I'm guessing yes.
Yes. Again, that was one of those things that we started an early conversation with Jacobs because they were ultimately going to be the architect of record. And so we said, what were the protocols that we needed to follow? Who's taking the lead on families, and how are we formatting the set? What's the, you know, obviously we knew we were going to be working in BIM 360 because we had so many different collaborators on the project, and that was going to make the most sense. And so getting all of those things set up early in the process made it much smoother whenever it came time to hand off. And so yeah, there was definitely a lot of collaboration on that standpoint. And then obviously sharing all of that model was all shared with Whiting Turner to have access for takeoffs and things like that too.
I think we were also leveraging Enscape through SketchUp as well.
Oh yeah, Enscape is used through SketchUp. Right. I personally like working in SketchUp, especially whenever it's quick studies that need to be done in a short amount of time. I mean, that's how we did the whole exterior facade flip that Michael mentioned. Was we got some comments back from the president of the university, and literally overnight we were able to study 4 or 5 different options of what that could possibly be. and present that back to White and Turner in a short amount of time. Get buy-off on what the direction was, and then immediately get that back into Revit. So.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And there was just one final quick question. What types of media output did you use from Enscape? Was it still images, videos, panoramas, or anything else? Yeah, main media types, basically.
All of it.
All of the above.
Yes. So we did 360. We actually done animation. We've done stills. We've done panoramas.
We did
the QR code. So
we have the web executables. We have the standalone executables, and it was just
we leveraged really the full gamut. And that was part of the, if you go to that groundbreaking website, you can really get a sense of the variety there, because it's really exciting the way that ETSA leveraged those assets into their website, the groundbreaking. That's really become kind of a home base for people to see what's going on, what's happening.
Yeah, if it's possible, it would be great to drop the link in the chat or something so that folks can go to that website and just check out like a lot of that was built using Enscape's capabilities, just to get as much information and visuals out there since we couldn't do it in person.
Well, we can certainly add that link to the follow-up email, so I'll do that in the next few hours. So we have hit the top of the hour, so I think we'll have to wrap things up now, but thank you so much to everyone who presented to us today. Thank you to Overland, Michael, Charles and Rebecca. Thank you to Wayland from Jacobs, and our host from Art Construction, Scott and Matt. Thank you so much for all your involvement, and of course to our audience as well. Thanks for joining us and watching the webinar as well, and we hope you enjoyed it. Just one thing to mention before you leave, there's going to be a short survey that will pop up on your screen when you exit the webinar, so you have the chance to provide us with your feedback on today's session. So we'd really appreciate if you could take the time to fill that in. And I'd also like to mention that you'll receive a link to the recording by email as soon as it's available as well. And we'll include that link to the groundbreaking and a few extra useful links there as well. So with that, I think we'll wrap it up. Thank you very much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much, everyone.